Howdy, friends. Nicole here, your host of the Resilient Rainer podcast. All right, guys. Should you ride patterns at home? This is a controversial topic in the horse world. Let's talk about it.
Welcome to the Resilient Rainer, the premier podcast focused on mental performance for equestrians and improved horse show performance. Whether you're a rookie reiner or a seasoned competitor, this show is for riders who want to take their skills to the next level and achieve their full potential in the show ring. I'm Nicole Burnett, and I'm a master mindset coach who's obsessed with helping you achieve all those horse dreams you always thought were impossible. Join me each week to develop a show-ready mindset and gain the competitive edge you need to compete with confidence. One of the things that's come up recently in some sessions has been riding patterns, because it's show season, right? And so you go to the show, you're riding patterns, you're doing all that stuff. Should you be riding patterns at home? And for most of the people that I work with, their trainers usually say some variation of don't ride too many patterns. Like, your horse is going to start anticipating. It's not good. You shouldn't do that. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about if you should ride patterns at home or not. What do you think? Do you ride patterns at home? And I don't just mean parts of a pattern. I don't just mean, oh, I did 2 circles or I trotted over some logs. I mean, do you put together a pattern of 3 to 4 maneuvers at least, and then you ride it? And you don't necessarily allow yourself to stop and fix everything, right? Do you actually ride patterns at home? So let me ask you a question. How much thought do you put into planning out your rides? Now, for years, I can honestly say that I was a very reactive rider, and I would come out, I'd brush my horse, braid their mane, we'd ride around, and I'd hop on and we'd do some walking, some trotting, some loping. But how much was I actively planning out my rides? How much progress did I sacrifice by not putting any thought or more thought into my rides ahead of time? Now, as a mental coach, I have a different perspective on riding patterns than your trainer. I am a huge advocate of riding patterns. So let's take a trip down memory lane. Now, as a kid, I was the part of 4-H, and it was amazing for me. We had non-mounted meetings. We learned about public speaking, presentations, horse care, nutrition, and we had riding meetings. And you know what we did every single practice? We rode patterns. And they were often really simple. It could be something like just riding a figure 8 at the trot, then the lope, 360 turn, maybe back. But we rode patterns all the time. So now let's come up to present day. Like I said, most of the clients that I work with, they are shocked when I suggest to them that they ride patterns. I hear over and over, my horse is going to anticipate. It's not a good thing. We shouldn't be riding patterns. So why would I recommend that you ride patterns if current wisdom says it'll ruin your horse? So if you've been following for any amount of time, you know that one of my big pillars in my coaching is consistency. Show up, do it again and again and again, and don't quit. Just don't quit. You've got to have some dog-headed discipline to just keep at it. So when you ride a pattern, you're executing a plan. Instead of riding randomly like a chicken with their head cut off, making decisions at the last minute, making it harder for both you and your horse. Instead, if you practice a pattern, you have planned ahead to do this well. You'll have planned ahead where in that space where you're going to ask for the turn, when you're going to cue for your lead departure, how you're going to space out those maneuvers in the arena, right? Or in the field, wherever you're riding. And then you practice all of the skills that you drill in isolation. It is so helpful because it's going to highlight your lack of skill for you and your horse if all you do is ride around the ring without any focused practice, right? If what you need to do when you go show is you need to put together a pattern, you need to string together maneuver after maneuver after maneuver, it's not going to go very well if you've never practiced putting maneuvers together. When I was a kid, I noticed that the more that I rode a pattern on the fly, the worse we did. My horse would do things like, get really stiff in the mouth. They would toss their head, and it was generally not a very smooth performance. But the more I planned ahead, and the better the pattern went. It wasn't as simple as how well trained the horse was either, because I see this all the time from very inexpensive to very expensive horses, that this is about what's happening in the rider's mind and how they are planning out that pattern. And it's not about how well trained the horse is. Even the best trained horse, if you cannot guide them through that pattern, they cannot perform well for you. Now, is there anything magical or special about riding a pattern? Boring old patterns, they force you to honestly assess where you and your horse are at any given moment. Your barrel pattern, that time is what it is. Your ranch riding score, your reining score, even if your score is self-assessed at home, it is what it is at that moment in time. And that score, it reveals things to you. This is a piece of information. And it might reveal that your extended trot, oh, it's great. It's amazing. Your lope overs, oh, you're killing it. And actually, to summarize what I observe from talking with clients, the biggest thing that riding patterns tends to reveal is that maneuvers are fine in isolation, but that riders and their horses, they fall apart in transitions. So riding a pattern is really challenging because it forces you to plan ahead. You have to make transitions very quickly. It's going to highlight things in your riding and training that you can hide when you babysit a ride or you avoid pattern work. For example, let's say your horse likes to cut the corner on a circle. Riding a pattern is going to reveal that in a way that everyday training may not. Or let's say your back through and jog over pulls are both really great. But when you put them together in a pattern and then you also throw in a gate and somehow all those maneuvers are now suffering. And let's not forget another important aspect of riding patterns. It absolutely will increase your confidence. So many folks say that practice makes perfect. I say that practice makes confident. The first time you rode your bike, were you confident? The first time you drove a car, were you confident? The first time you rode a horse, were you confident? Of course not. The first time you rode a pattern, were you confident? No. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally normal. When I started riding patterns, they were terrible, okay? And then they got better. The more you practice, the more confident you'll be in your skills. So practice what you need. Ride patterns. Don't be afraid of them. To those that say your horse will start to anticipate, I say the benefit to the rider of practicing riding patterns, managing yourself, managing your emotions, managing and handling all of those rapid fire transitions that'll come up, all of that far outweighs, a horse potentially to anticipate. And horses are smarter than we give them credit for. They're gonna figure out patterns anyway if you ever show. They're not that stupid, okay? You're better off working on your overall training and working on patterns so that your horse knows to wait for your cues. Overall, riding patterns forces you to plan out your rides. It forces you to think about what you're training or areas that you're not training. It forces you to deal with quick transitions. It forces you to be consistent in order to master the pattern in all of its components. And the more consistent you are, the more consistent your horse will be. So go write a pattern the next time you hop on your horse. What do you notice about what your horse does? What do you notice about yourself and what you do? I really bet you learned something. So take note and then share it with me. Leave a comment, send me a message. I love to hear updates from you guys about how you're doing.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll talk again soon. If you're interested in this and you're ready to have some accountability and a step-by-step plan to improve your confidence as a rider so that you can level up your riding, come join us in Resilient Rainer Academy. Money back guarantee. Love to have you. Until next time, friend.